The shrill beep of a hospital monitor echoed through the quiet room as Amara held her mother's weak hand with both of hers. Tears burned in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Her mother managed a faint smile, trying to comfort the very daughter who was desperately trying to save her. A doctor walked in with a file in his hand and stopped beside the bed. His expression said everything before he even spoke. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "The next treatment must be paid for today. If the payment doesn't arrive before evening, we will have to stop the medication." The room suddenly felt smaller. Amara stared at him, unable to breathe. "How much?" she finally asked. 90,000 naira. Her heart sank. She barely had enough money to get home. Her mother squeezed her hand. "Don't cry for me, my child. God will make a way." But Amara knew faith alone wouldn't pay the hospital bill. Outside the hospital, she called everyone she could think of. Friends apologized. Relatives made excuses. The bank rejected her loan request within minutes. Even her employer had already given her every advance they could. As the sun slowly disappeared behind the city buildings, hope disappeared with it. Then her phone vibrated. It was an old university friend she hadn't spoken to in months. "Amara," the voice said carefully, "I know this is going to sound impossible, but I have something that might save your mother." Amara stopped walking. "What do you mean?" "A wealthy family is looking for a woman." "For what?" There was a short silence before the answer came. "A contract marriage." Amara frowned. "You're joking." "No. A billionaire needs a temporary wife for 6 months. She almost ended the call. Who would agree to something like that? Someone who needs 5 million naira. Everything around her suddenly became silent. 5 million. The number repeated inside her head. It was enough to pay every hospital bill, clear every debt, and give her mother a real chance to live. But nothing in life came that easily. "What's the catch?" she asked. "I don't know everything," her friend admitted. "I only know they need someone educated, respectable, and available immediately. You would attend family events, live by the contract, and after 6 months, you both walk away." Amara looked back toward the hospital window where her mother lay fighting for another day. Every value she had lived by suddenly stood against the one person she couldn't bear to lose. "Why would a billionaire pay a complete stranger to become his wife?" she whispered. Her friend had no answer. That silence frightened her more than the offer itself. After a long moment, Amara closed her eyes and took the deepest breath of her life. "Send me the details." She believed she was signing a 6-month agreement to save her mother's life. She had no idea she was actually stepping into a world where money hid dangerous secrets, trust was more expensive than wealth, and the contract would become the smallest problem she would face. Amara didn't open the message that night. Instead, she returned to the hospital and sat quietly beside her mother's bed until she fell asleep. Looking at the tired face that had once worked endless hours to raise her alone, memories came rushing back. Her mother had been a schoolteacher who believed that education could change any life. Even after losing her husband when Amara was only 7, she never begged, never complained, and never allowed her daughter to feel less than anyone else. She worked extra classes, marked papers late into the night, and quietly skipped her own meals whenever money became too tight. Growing up, Amara had watched those sacrifices without fully understanding them. Now, she carried the weight of every one of them on her own shoulders. The following morning, Amara left the hospital before sunrise and headed straight to work. She wasn't someone who waited for miracles. She believed in hard work. By day, she worked as an administrative assistant in a small company, earning just enough to survive. After work, she tutored neighborhood children to earn extra income. On weekends, she sold homemade pastries prepared from recipes her mother had taught her years ago. Every naira she earned had a purpose. Every expense was carefully planned. Yet no matter how hard she worked, life always seemed one step ahead of her. Most people who met Amara saw only a quiet, polite young woman with a gentle smile. They never saw the nights she cried alone after paying bills. They never knew she had given up a scholarship opportunity abroad because leaving would have meant abandoning her sick mother. She never regretted that choice, but sometimes she wondered what her life might have looked like if circumstances had been kinder. Even then, she refused to become bitter. She believed that kindness was something no hardship should ever take away. Later that afternoon, the hospital pharmacist handed her a small bag of medicine. "This will only last 2 days," he said gently. "After that, another payment will be needed." Amara thanked him with a smile she didn't truly feel. As she walked outside, she checked her bank balance one more time, hoping the numbers had somehow changed. They hadn't. Her savings were almost gone, and every option she had trusted was disappearing one by one. Her phone buzzed again. It was the same unread message from her friend. This time, she opened it. Inside was an address, a meeting time, and one short sentence. "If you truly want to save your mother, this may be your only chance." Amara stared at the screen for several long seconds. Deep inside, she already knew the answer she never thought she would have to give. Amara barely slept that night. The address from the message stayed on her phone screen, and every time she looked at it, her heart beat a little faster. By morning, she had made her decision. Not because she trusted the offer, but because she couldn't watch her mother lose her chance to live. Dressed in her simplest navy blue dress, she took a bus across the city until it stopped in front of a massive iron gate guarded by uniformed security officers. Beyond the gate stood a mansion so grand it looked more like a private hotel than a family home. For a brief moment, she wondered if she should turn around. People like her didn't belong in places like this. But then she remembered her mother's tired smile in the hospital and forced herself to step forward. "Good morning," she said quietly. "I'm here for the appointment." One of the guards checked her name on a tablet before opening the gate without another word. Inside, everything felt strangely quiet. The perfectly trimmed gardens, the polished marble floors, and the expensive paintings all spoke of unimaginable wealth, yet the house itself felt cold, almost empty, as if happiness had never been invited inside. A woman in a dark business suit greeted her politely and led her upstairs into a large office. Standing beside the window was a tall man in his early 30s, dressed in a simple black suit. He didn't look up immediately. Instead, he finished reading a document before calmly placing it on the desk. When their eyes finally met, Amara expected arrogance. Instead, she found something harder to understand. His face showed almost no emotion, but his eyes carried a quiet exhaustion, as though success had cost him far more than anyone realized. "Miss Amara," he said. "Please, have a seat." His voice was calm, controlled, and completely professional. A thick contract was placed in front of her. "Before you read," he continued, "there are rules you must understand. This marriage is a legal arrangement and nothing more. It will last exactly 6 months. You will attend family functions with me, appear in public when necessary, and maintain the image of a married couple. We will have separate private spaces, separate personal lives, and no emotional expectations. At the end of 6 months, the marriage ends, and you receive 5 million naira." Amara listened carefully, surprised by how rehearsed every word sounded. It felt less like a marriage proposal and more like a business meeting. She slowly turned the pages of the contract until one sentence caught her attention. "Either party may terminate this agreement immediately if the terms are violated." She looked up. What exactly counts as violating the contract? For the first time, the billionaire hesitated. It lasted only a second, but she noticed it. "You'll understand everything that matters," he replied. "The written rules are enough." His answer created more questions than it solved. After a long silence, Amara closed the file and looked directly at him. "May I ask one question?" He nodded. "With your wealth and influence, why do you need a stranger to pretend to be your wife?" The room became completely silent. The billionaire looked toward the window instead of answering. A faint smile appeared for the first time, but it carried no happiness. Because sometimes, he said quietly, having money makes simple things impossible. Before Amara could ask another question, the woman beside the door interrupted. Sir, the family has been informed she has arrived. His expression changed instantly. Then we don't have much time. At that moment, Amara realized this contract wasn't simply about money. Someone else was waiting, and whoever that person was could change everything. The large front doors opened without a sound, but the silence inside the mansion felt heavier than the walls themselves. Amara followed the house manager through a long hallway lined with expensive paintings and sparkling chandeliers. Every corner reflected wealth, yet nothing about the place felt warm. The air carried an unusual stillness, as if everyone inside was carefully choosing what they said and what they kept hidden. The house manager finally stopped beside a staircase. Your room has been prepared, she said politely. Until the contract ends, this will be your home. Amara nodded, but before she could take another step, she noticed several staff members quietly staring at her from a distance. The moment their eyes met hers, they quickly looked away. No one smiled. No one welcomed her. It felt as though they already knew something she didn't. As she reached the second floor, an elderly gardener carrying fresh flowers gave her a gentle smile. Welcome, miss, he said kindly. Not everyone here speaks with their mouth. Some people speak with their eyes. Pay attention to both. Before Amara could ask what he meant, he continued walking as though nothing unusual had been said. His strange warning stayed in her mind. Later that afternoon, another employee showed her around the mansion. There was a private library, an indoor garden, a grand dining hall, and more guest rooms than Amara could count. Everything looked perfect, but every conversation stopped whenever she entered a room. Even the servants lowered their voices when she walked past. It wasn't simple curiosity. It felt more like disappointment. Someone clearly hadn't expected her to be here. As evening approached, the billionaire joined her for dinner. The dining table was long enough for 20 people, yet only the two of them sat there. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable, but it was unfamiliar. You'll meet my family tomorrow, he said calmly. Some of them may have questions. Answer politely, but don't explain more than necessary. Amara looked at him. Do they know this marriage is only a contract? He paused before taking another sip of water. Some know part of the truth. Others believe something different. His answer only deepened the mystery. Just as dinner ended, the sound of high heels echoed across the marble floor. A beautifully dressed woman stepped into the room without knocking. She looked directly at Amara before slowly turning toward the billionaire. A faint smile appeared on her face, but it carried no kindness. So, she said softly, this is the woman everyone has been talking about. Her eyes returned to Amara, carefully studying every detail. You're not what I expected. Without waiting for a reply, she walked away as confidently as she had entered. Amara watched her disappear down the hallway. She didn't know the woman's name, but one thing had become painfully clear. Someone had expected to stand in her place, and that someone wasn't ready to give it up. The next morning, the mansion was unusually quiet, but Amara could feel that someone was watching her every move. As she walked through the grand hallway toward the dining room, conversation stopped the moment she appeared. A few servants lowered their eyes, while others exchanged silent glances. It wasn't simple curiosity anymore. It felt as if everyone already knew a story she had never been told. When she entered the dining room, the same elegant woman from the previous evening was already sitting there, calmly stirring her coffee. She smiled politely, but there wasn't a trace of warmth behind it. Good morning, she said. Please, have a seat. Amara thanked her and sat down. Before she could touch her breakfast, the woman looked at her and asked, Tell me, how does it feel to wake up in a life that was never meant to be yours? The question caught Amara completely off guard. I'm sorry, she replied. The woman laughed softly. Nothing. Just a thought. Her smile remained perfect, but her eyes revealed quiet resentment. A few moments later, Damien entered the room. His expression remained calm as always. "Good morning," he said before taking his seat. The elegant woman immediately brightened. "Damien, I was just keeping your wife company." The way she emphasized the last word made Amara uncomfortable. Damien simply nodded and focused on his breakfast. His cold reaction clearly wasn't what the woman had hoped for. As soon as he looked away, her smile disappeared. She stared at Amara for only a second, but it was enough to send a chill down her spine. Later that afternoon, Amara found the house manager arranging flowers in the living room. "Excuse me," she asked carefully. "Who is that woman?" The manager hesitated before answering. "Her name is Vanessa. She has been close to this family for years." "Is she family?" Amara asked. "Not by blood," the manager replied quietly. "But many people believed she eventually would be." Before Amara could ask another question, the manager looked around to make sure no one was listening. "Be careful what you say around her. She never forgets an insult, even one that was never intended." That evening, Amara stepped onto the balcony for fresh air. From below, she heard voices coming from the garden. Hidden behind a stone pillar, she accidentally overheard Vanessa speaking on the phone. "I don't care what anyone says," Vanessa whispered sharply. "I have waited too long for this family, this house, and Damien. I'm not going to let some ordinary girl take everything from me." She ended the call and walked away before Amara could move. Standing alone in the cool night air, Amara finally understood the truth. This wasn't jealousy over a contract. Vanessa believed the place beside Damien already belonged to her, and she was prepared to fight for it. Amara never tried to impress anyone in the mansion. She didn't wear expensive jewelry or pretend she belonged among people who had lived with wealth all their lives. Instead, she treated everyone with the same quiet respect she had learned from her mother. On her second morning, she noticed one of the elderly housekeepers struggling to carry a heavy basket of clean laundry upstairs. Without saying a word, Amara walked over and lifted one side. "You don't have to do that, ma'am," the woman said nervously. Amara smiled. "My mother always said that helping someone never makes you smaller." Together they carried the basket to its destination. The housekeeper thanked her with tears in her eyes. It had been years since anyone in the mansion had offered to help instead of simply giving orders. Over the next few days, small moments like that began to change the atmosphere inside the house. She remembered the names of every employee. She greeted the security guards each morning. She thanked the cooks after every meal and often visited the kitchen just to compliment their work. The servants who had once avoided looking at her slowly began smiling whenever she passed. Even the elderly gardener laughed more often whenever she stopped to admire his flowers. Word spread quietly through the mansion that the billionaire's new wife treated people with genuine kindness instead of expecting special treatment. It wasn't something money could buy, and everyone noticed the difference. Damien noticed it too, although he never mentioned it directly. One evening, he returned home much later than usual after a long business meeting. As he entered the dining room, he found Amara serving soup to the elderly gardener, who had injured his hand while trimming the roses that afternoon. "You should be resting," she gently told the old man. "The flowers can wait until tomorrow." Damien stood silently in the doorway, watching without interrupting. He had spent years surrounded by people who were polite only when they wanted something from him. Watching Amara care for someone who had nothing to offer in return felt strangely unfamiliar. Later that night, they found themselves alone on the balcony overlooking the city lights. After several quiet moments, Damien finally spoke. "The staff seems happier lately." Amara smiled softly. "People don't need grand gifts to feel valued. Sometimes they just need someone to notice them." Damien looked at her for a long moment before turning back toward the skyline. "You're different from what I expected," he admitted quietly. Amara laughed gently. "I could say the same about you." For the first time since signing the contract, a small smile appeared on Damien's face. It disappeared almost as quickly as it came, but Amara had seen it. From an upstairs window, Vanessa watched the entire conversation without making a sound. As she quietly closed the curtain, anger filled her eyes. She had spent years trying to earn Damien's attention, yet somehow this ordinary woman was slowly breaking down walls that wealth and status never could. And Vanessa had no intention of letting that continue. Amara tried to remind herself every morning that the marriage was only temporary. The signed contract was still locked inside Damien's office, and its conditions had not changed. 6 months. No emotional attachment. No promises beyond the agreement. Yet something inside the mansion had quietly begun to shift. Their conversations no longer felt forced. They shared breakfast more often, exchanged small smiles without realizing it, and sometimes sat together in comfortable silence after long days. Neither of them spoke about the growing change between them because admitting it would make everything far more complicated. What had started as a business arrangement was slowly becoming something neither of them had planned. 4.1 Rainy evening, the electricity suddenly went out across part of the estate. The mansion fell into darkness, leaving only the sound of rain tapping against the windows. Amara was walking downstairs when she missed a step. Before she could fall, someone caught her arm. Damien steadied her without saying a word. For a brief moment, neither of them moved. Their eyes met in the dim emergency lights, and the silence between them felt different than ever before. "Are you all right?" he asked quietly. Amara nodded, though her heart was racing much faster than the accident deserved. "I'm fine," she whispered. He slowly let go of her hand, but somehow the warmth of that simple touch remained long after they stepped apart. Over the following days, Damien found himself noticing things he had once ignored. He admired the way Amara always checked on her mother before doing anything else. He admired how every employee smiled when she entered a room. Even his grandfather, who rarely praised anyone, had begun asking whether Amara would join him for afternoon tea. Damien had spent years believing that trust was dangerous because everyone wanted something from him. But Amara had never asked for more than what the contract promised. That simple truth unsettled him more than any business challenge ever had. Amara was fighting a different battle. Every time Damien showed unexpected kindness, she reminded herself that their marriage had an expiration date. She couldn't afford to build dreams around borrowed time. Her mother's treatment had already begun, and the money was doing exactly what she had agreed to. Falling in love had never been part of the arrangement. She repeated that thought over and over, hoping her heart would finally listen. Late one evening, Vanessa watched Damien place his suit jacket over Amara's shoulders as they returned from a charity event in the cold night air. It was a small gesture, almost unnoticeable to anyone else. But Vanessa saw the concern in his eyes. She had known Damien for years, and she had never seen him look at anyone that way. Her hands slowly tightened around the balcony railing. This was no longer a harmless contract. Feelings were beginning to grow, and if she didn't stop them soon, she feared she would lose Damien forever. Vanessa stood alone inside her bedroom, staring at an old photograph resting on her dressing table. In the picture, she and Damien were smiling at a family charity event years earlier. Everyone had assumed they would eventually marry. His relatives admired her elegance, business partners respected her family's influence, and even the newspapers had quietly predicted they would become one of the city's most powerful couples. Then Amara had appeared out of nowhere. Within a few weeks, years of careful planning had begun slipping through Vanessa's fingers. She wasn't angry because of the contract anymore. She was angry because Damien had started looking at another woman the way she had always hoped he would look at her. "This ends now," she whispered to herself. "If kindness brought her into this house, then suspicion will take her out." The following morning, Vanessa invited several members of the household to afternoon tea, smiling as though nothing was wrong. She laughed at their jokes, complimented the staff, and spoke warmly about family traditions. No one noticed that every conversation was carefully leading toward one subject. "It's difficult to trust someone whose past we barely know," she said casually while stirring her tea. "People can hide many things when money is involved." She never mentioned Amara's name directly, yet everyone understood exactly who she meant. By evening, Quiet whispers had already begun spreading through the mansion that a day later, another piece of Vanessa's plan quietly fell into place. She secretly paid one of the newer employees to place an expensive diamond bracelet inside Amara's wardrobe. The young maid hesitated. "But she's innocent," she whispered nervously. Vanessa calmly slid an envelope filled with cash across the table. "You're not stealing anything," she replied. "You're simply helping the truth reveal itself." Afraid of losing her job, the maid reluctantly agreed. That same afternoon, Damien received an anonymous envelope at his office. Inside were several carefully edited photographs showing Amara meeting an unknown man outside the hospital. The pictures looked suspicious, but they hid one important fact. The man was actually the doctor treating her mother, and the conversation had lasted less than 5 minutes. The anonymous note beneath the photographs read, "Your wife isn't as loyal as you believe. Ask yourself where she's really been spending her afternoons." Meanwhile, completely unaware of the trap surrounding her, Amara visited the hospital after work with fresh fruit for her mother. The doctor smiled with relief. "Your mother's condition is improving," he said. "The treatment is working better than we expected." Tears filled Amara's eyes. For the first time in weeks, hope felt real again. She left the hospital believing life was finally beginning to turn around. That evening, as she returned to the mansion, she found several servants standing silently in the entrance hall. Their usual smiles had disappeared. The house manager refused to meet her eyes. Damien stood at the far end of the room, his expression colder than she had ever seen before. Without saying a single word, he placed the diamond bracelet on the table between them. "I want you to explain something," he said quietly. Before Amara could even ask what was happening, 2 security officers stepped forward. In that terrifying moment, she realized someone had carefully arranged every piece of this nightmare, and every piece of evidence pointed directly at her. The mansion's grand ballroom was filled with guests dressed in elegant evening clothes. Business partners, family friends, and respected members of society gathered beneath sparkling crystal chandeliers, celebrating the annual charity gala hosted by Damien's family. Every conversation seemed warm, every smile looked genuine, yet Amara couldn't shake the strange feeling that something was terribly wrong. As she stood beside Damien greeting their guests, she noticed Vanessa watching from across the room. Her expression was calm, almost satisfied, as though she already knew how the evening would end. Amara tried to ignore the uneasy feeling growing inside her, but her instincts refused to stay silent. Halfway through the event, Damien's uncle suddenly stepped onto the small stage and tapped his glass for attention. "Before tonight continues," he announced, "we have an unfortunate matter that must be addressed." The cheerful conversations immediately faded into silence. 2 security officers walked toward Amara, carrying a small velvet box. One of them opened it, revealing the missing diamond bracelet that had supposedly disappeared from the family collection. The room filled with shocked whispers. Damien looked at the bracelet, then at Amara. His face remained calm, but the disappointment in his eyes was impossible to hide. "This bracelet," his uncle continued, "was discovered inside Mrs. Damien's wardrobe this afternoon." Amara stared at the bracelet in complete disbelief. "That's impossible," she said, taking a step forward. "I've never seen that before." Before anyone could respond, another family member handed Damien the anonymous envelope containing the edited photographs from outside the hospital. He silently looked through each picture while the guests watched every movement. The images seemed convincing. They showed Amara meeting an unknown man in secret and leaving with him shortly afterward. No one in the room knew the truth. No one knew the man was her mother's doctor. Vanessa lowered her head, pretending to be saddened by the situation. "I truly hope these rumors weren't real," she said softly. "Perhaps we all wanted to believe the best." Her carefully chosen words spread through the room like poison. The whispers became louder. Some guests shook their heads. Others looked at Amara with open suspicion. She searched the crowd desperately, hoping someone would believe her, but every face reflected doubt instead of trust. With tears filling her eyes, Amara turned toward Damien. "Please," she whispered. "You know me. You know I would never steal from anyone. The man in those pictures is my mother's doctor. I can prove it. The ballroom fell completely silent as everyone waited for Damien's response. He closed the envelope slowly and looked at her for several painful seconds. His eyes revealed an impossible battle between his heart and the evidence placed before him. Finally, he took a slow breath. Until the truth is confirmed, he said quietly, I think it's best if you leave the mansion. The words shattered Amara completely. She didn't argue again. She didn't beg. Fighting back tears, she removed her wedding ring and gently placed it on the table beside the bracelet. Without looking back, she walked through the silent crowd and out of the ballroom. As the heavy doors closed behind her, Damien remained frozen in place, watching the woman he had slowly come to trust disappear into the night. Deep inside, a painful question had already begun haunting him. What if he had just driven away the only person who had ever truly cared about him? Lena spent the entire night staring at the ceiling of her guest room, unable to forget the cold words Damien had spoken after signing their marriage contract. He had promised respect, honesty, and distance. Nothing more. Yet after everything they had shared inside the mansion, those promises no longer felt simple. Somewhere between quiet breakfasts, unexpected conversations, and the way he always noticed when she looked tired, the invisible wall between them had begun to crack. That frightened her more than the contract itself. She had entered this marriage to save her family, not to lose her heart. Every morning she reminded herself that in a few months she would walk away with 5 million Nigerian nairas and never see this life again. But every day that promise became harder to believe. Damien was fighting a battle no one could see. For years he had controlled every emotion, every business decision, and every relationship with perfect discipline. Feelings only made people weak. That was the lesson life had taught him. Yet Lena challenged every rule he had ever lived by without even trying. She never asked for expensive gifts. She thanked every employee by name. She laughed with the gardeners and shared meals with the kitchen staff. Somehow the mansion felt warmer simply because she lived there. He caught himself looking for her whenever he returned from work, and that realization unsettled him. One rainy evening the electricity briefly failed during a storm. Most of the mansion fell into darkness before the backup generator started. Lena stood near a large window, watching the rain fall over the gardens. Damien quietly joined her. I used to love storms, she whispered. What changed? My father always said storms pass. But lately it feels like one never ends. Damien looked at her for a long moment. Sometimes storms stay because they're waiting to change something. Neither of them realized how personal those words had become. After that night, silence between them no longer felt uncomfortable. They could sit together without speaking and still understand each other. Even the staff noticed the difference. Smiles appeared more often. Laughter echoed through the halls that had once felt empty, but happiness also attracted attention. From the second-floor balcony, Vanessa watched every interaction with growing anger. She saw the way Damien's eyes softened whenever Lena entered a room. She noticed how he cancelled meetings to have dinner at home. The future she had imagined for herself was slipping away. One afternoon Vanessa cornered Damien in his office. This arrangement is becoming embarrassing, she said sharply. People are starting to think your marriage is real. Damien calmly looked up from his desk. Maybe what people think isn't your concern. His answer hit her harder than she expected. Later that evening, Lena accidentally overheard part of the conversation. She didn't hear every word, but she heard enough to remind herself of one painful truth. Their marriage had started as a business deal. No matter how kind Damien had become, the contract still existed. She quietly returned to her room, clutching the calendar that marked the passing months. The end date suddenly felt much closer than before. For the first time, both of them wanted something neither had agreed to, and neither knew whether love could survive a relationship built on a lie. Everyone believed Lena had betrayed Damien. The accusations had spread too far, and even those who once respected her refused to meet her eyes. Yet deep inside the mansion, one person could no longer live with the guilt. Mrs. Grace, The elderly housekeeper who had served Damien's family for over 30 years, walked toward his office carrying a small envelope. Her hands trembled as she knocked on the door. "Sir," she said softly, "there's something you need to see before it's too late." Damien looked at the envelope with confusion. Inside was a small memory card she had found hidden behind a flower vase the morning after Lena was forced to leave. He immediately called the security technician and ordered the footage to be restored. Minutes later, the forgotten recording appeared on the large screen. Damien's face slowly lost all color. The video clearly showed Vanessa entering his private office after everyone had gone to sleep. She carefully opened Lena's handbag, planted the missing company documents inside, then smiled to herself before quietly leaving the room. Another camera captured her paying a staff member to remain silent. Every accusation, every piece of evidence, every painful misunderstanding had been carefully created by her. Damien could barely breathe. "What have I done?" he whispered. The following morning he called an emergency meeting at the mansion. Family members, company executives, household staff, and Vanessa all gathered inside the grand hall. Vanessa entered confidently, believing she had finally won. But the moment the security footage appeared on the screen, her smile disappeared. Silence filled the room as every lie unfolded before everyone's eyes. "This can't be real," Vanessa shouted. "It is," Damien replied firmly. "And you've destroyed innocent lives to protect your own selfish dream." She desperately blamed the staff, the technology, even Lena herself, but every excuse collapsed under undeniable proof. The employee she had bribed finally stepped forward with tears in his eyes. "I'm sorry," he confessed. "She paid me to stay quiet. Lena never did anything wrong." The room fell completely silent. Damien stood before everyone and lowered his head. "I failed the one person who trusted me the most. I judged her without listening. That mistake will stay with me forever." Vanessa lost her position in the company that same day. The family cut every financial tie with her, and she walked out of the mansion completely alone, realizing that greed had cost her everything she had hoped to gain. But while justice had finally exposed every lie, Damien knew winning the truth was only the beginning. The person he truly needed to face was no longer standing in that room. Could a heart he had broken ever choose to trust him again? Damien searched for Lena for 3 days before he finally found her at the small neighborhood clinic where she had volunteered long before their paths had crossed. She was helping an elderly woman fill out medical forms when she looked up and saw him standing quietly by the entrance. For a moment, neither of them moved. The memories between them were too heavy for simple words. Damien slowly walked closer, but he stopped several steps away, knowing he had no right to expect anything from her. "I didn't come to ask you to return," he said softly. "I came to say I'm sorry. I failed you when you needed me most, and no apology can erase that." Lena remained silent, listening carefully. For the first time since they had met, the powerful billionaire looked like a man carrying the weight of his own mistakes. That he placed a small envelope on the nearby table. "The contract has been cancelled," he continued. "The 5 million Nigerian nairas is still yours because you honored every promise you made. But I don't want you to stay because of money. If you never want to see me again, I'll respect that decision." Lena looked at the envelope but made no move to pick it up. During the weeks she had spent away from the mansion, she had learned something important. The woman who had accepted a marriage out of desperation was no longer the same person standing there now. She had discovered her own strength. She no longer measured her worth by the problems she could solve or the sacrifices she could make. She deserved honesty, respect, and love that never needed a contract. After a long silence, she finally spoke. "You broke my trust, Damien. That pain won't disappear overnight." "I know," he answered. "If it takes years to earn it back, I'll spend those years trying." His voice carried no pride, only sincerity. Several weeks later, Damien continued visiting the clinic, not with expensive gifts or grand promises, but simply to help. Sometimes he organized medical supplies. Sometimes he repaired broken equipment. Other days he sat beside patients who had no family. Slowly, Lena saw a different man. Not the billionaire everyone admired, but the humble man who had learned that love could never be bought. One quiet evening, they walked through the same garden where they had once spoken during a rainstorm. This time there was no contract waiting for them. No deadlines. No lies. Damien gently reached for her hand. "Can we begin again?" he asked. Lena smiled through grateful tears and placed her hand in his. "This time," she whispered, without pretending. 6 months had started with a business agreement, but it ended with something far more valuable than money. It ended with forgiveness earned through actions, trust rebuilt through patience, and two hearts choosing each other freely. Because true love is never measured by wealth. It is measured by the courage to admit mistakes, the strength to forgive, and the willingness to build a future on honesty instead of fear.